All right, so now we're live. All right, so I'll count us down. So, all right. I think we both. Let me see. Like that. Yeah. All right, we can do that. All right, so three, two, one. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Down to Business podcast here with Tamar Turner. So, as I was kind of speaking to him a little bit before the interview, I think a lot of y'all will also resonate just knowing who my audience is, that we probably needed Brad some years ago in our lives, and he probably would have made things not only easier on ourselves, but maybe even on our parents. But more particularly on ourselves, and maybe just made us a little bit more eager, maybe just made us a little less worried. But depending on, your background, depending on how you kind of grew and what your path looked like education wise, you could kind of be a hit or miss. But I'm really excited to really sit down with Brad today, because I also think he'll really be of help to a lot of us still, as we kind of continue to move, as a lot of us now are thinking about having families or already have families or in the process of that and anything. So this can be education. This can be things that, we pass along for generations to come. So I'm trying to walk a little bit on eggshells. I'm not trying to give too much, because I want Brad to really dive into everything and really give y'all everything he has. So before we get into that though, Brad, how's everything on your end? How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Good. Absolutely. No, thank you for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate it. So before we get into all things, I know we're going to have some people tapping in from your end. I know we're going to have some people tapping in from my side, but we're also going to have some newcomers along the way who may not know anything about either one of us, but nonetheless came across the episode in some capacity. So to get everybody on the same page, to bring everybody up to speed and put us on an even playing field, can you just do two things for me? Can you, one, just tell me a little bit about yourself, and then can you, two, just tell me what brings you on the Down to Business podcast today?
Yeah. So my name is Brad Baldridge. I'm a financial planner, CFP, and I have a specialty in what I call late stage college planning, which is I help families with high school kids figure out the college process. So I guess that's probably what brings me to the podcast as well, because of that expertise. So, I spend a lot of time working with families trying to figure out if they qualify for need-based aid or merit aid, and how they can save and invest, and what they might do differently as far as picking schools or adjusting income or assets in order to qualify for more aid. And then, of course, there's a large swath of the people I work with who don't qualify for any sort of need-based aid, but they still need to pay for college. So if you don't get need-based aid, then you have to focus on merit aid and negotiating with schools and saving and investing and tax planning and some other areas as well.
Got you. So as I said, you probably have a lot of people that come to you with just stress, with heartache, with confusion, maybe even with a misinformation or miseducation, not knowing certain things. I know with, a story that I tell often is that a lot of my colleagues in college, when I went to East Carolina University for undergrad in 2014, there was a class that I took, and the professor one day posed a question to us, and he pretty much said, how many people felt prepared for college from a financial aid standpoint, from a just ready to go, ready to hit the ground running standpoint? And not a lot of people raised their hand. It was only about three of us, myself included. But the commonality that we had, the three people who raised their hand, was that we all went to private or charter school. And then he posed the question to the latter. So who did not feel prepared, who, just felt like kind of walking in the dark and not really knowing anything and not really informed about everything? The vast majority then shot their hand up, and all that they pretty much had in common, maybe with the exception of a couple, was that they all went to public schools in some capacity. So that was when I really started to realize that, my little brother even went to one of the best public schools in Philadelphia, where I'm from. But in looking at the comparison of how we both kind of, our college application process, our financial aid process, the information and everything that we did, two totally different processes. And quickly I learned that, sometimes, and it's not fair, but it's just like, if you're not willing to pay for education or pay for those specific resources or pay for those schools or universities, as they call it, you won't be able to get that time, that attention, that true information that you need. And I don't think that that's fair to anyone, because, I feel like while I raised my hand saying that I felt prepared, there were still a lot of things I needed to learn, still a lot of things I needed to do. But ultimately, there shouldn't be a thing of people just were coming in here blindly. And that was quickly when I learned that, just the disparities in the education system with aid and everything like that. So initially, right off the bat, my curiosity really becomes, why? Well, because for me, I asked that question because college, financial aid, fast, but none of it is fun. None of it is anything. But, I feel like with a lot of what makes it kind of stressful, or a lot of what makes it confusing maybe is just our knowledge or our lack thereof in a sense, or just thinking, not always necessarily getting the help that we can, not always be getting the best customer service per se, not getting someone like you who's going to sit down, really take the time with us, see what we qualify for, see what we don't qualify for. So how did you really propel yourself into this industry? Was this a personal experience where you noticing a lot of people around you kind of coming to you and just dealing with things, and you kind of wanted to step in and just do something? What was that like for you getting started?
Right. Yeah. So I started in financial advising, and as college became more expensive, it became a bigger piece of the questions and problems that we were trying to solve. And I realized that there's a lot of strategies and tactics that families can use to lower the cost of college. Now, it's almost always painful, but if you can save 10 or 20% on the big number that is college, it's, definitely worth it. And then, and often we can save more, but not always. And, so that's really the decision point. Now, some of the decision points are also around, well, is it worth it at all? I mean, should we just skip it and move on to something else? And I think most people realize that the answer is, it depends. There is no, well, this is what everybody should do, whether it's paying for college or choosing a college or whatever it might be. And, lots of people talk about return on investment and that kind of stuff. But again, most of the time we're talking about our kids, and when we make very few decisions on what's good for our kids based on return on investment. So, while it's an interesting exercise, it has very little to do with reality. And I think that's, where a lot of people that are into the numbers, kind of trip up and say, well, based on my analysis, this is the best school. And then the student says, but I don't want to go there. And then everything breaks down from there.
I will say that, yes, a lot of that back and forth, a lot of that pain and that heartache does come with that college application process, that deciding and that really trying to figure out, and the parents' interest versus the children's interest. And then in my case, I was a first generation. So it was really, those conversations were even harder to have, because sometimes you feel like you don't necessarily have somebody who can resonate with you, who can relate to that. And sometimes they want you to kind of go their path, whether it be military, trade, or anything like that. And like you said, there is no perfect road. There's no blueprint. There's no to say, hey, this is what everybody needs to do in order to get where you want to go, because everybody is different in that sense. So I like that. I understand that. And you spoke to your first, how you opened it was so perfect. Now that college has become so expensive, because it's crazy now. I'm even looking at my high school, because my high school is private, so we had to pay for it. It's almost a college tuition right now. So it's actually kind of crazy just to see how everything is just slowly but surely, just that foundation is continuing to build. Now, you spoke about it in the beginning. You said late stage college planning. I'm very interested to take a deeper dive just into that, because once we enter high school, I feel like you just hear the talks of college all the time, from freshman year to sophomore year to junior year, arguably the most important year. That's what colleges are looking at. That's what they're paying attention to senior year, to, hey, let's bring it on home. Let's figure it out. The decision should already be made. So at what point does late stage college planning really take into effect? And what do you do specifically to ensure that students and parents are making the right decisions moving forward?
Right. So late stage planning really refers to the fact that, college is here now, right? We really need to actually do the work of visiting colleges, figuring out how to apply to colleges, how are we going to pay for colleges. There's planning around, well, college is someday. I've got a 2-year-old and they may go to college someday. Maybe we should save and invest, or maybe we should make some plans. But then when you have a 17-year-old that's a junior in high school, and they're talking, well, we need to start visiting colleges, and college is becoming very real. Now there's a much more complex planning process around visiting colleges. How do you find a school that's good fit? What will it actually cost? Will you get need-based aid? Will you get merit aid? Is there ways to reduce the cost? You certainly can go to a private school for the cost of a public, or even less, for the right kids in the right situations. So if that's you, it would be good to know that. Stanford just released, not just, in the last year or two, they had a press release where they essentially said that if your income is under 100,000, then Stanford will cover all of tuition and all of room and board. So it makes Stanford essentially free. Now, a lot of people would say, well, we can't afford Stanford. You look at the price tag of $90,000-ish, and most people would say, nope, cross it off the list. But again, if your income's under 100,000, you should not cross it off the list because it won't cost that much. It'll be a low cost option. Now, I think for most people, the real challenge is getting accepted to Stanford. You need to be a rock star essentially in order to get accepted. Now, if you happen to have that rock star, put Stanford on the list. But there's lots of colleges out there that realize that they're competing with the state schools, and some of them can get within reason. Now, again, will they all? No. And it really depends on your student and their grades and academics and your financial situation. How much need do you have and how much can you afford to spend? So it's a pretty complicated situation. And I think that's what, so it's going to take time. And lots of people don't like, working in the financial areas. They don't want to figure out budgets and how this is all going to work. So it's something that you can easily avoid until you can't. And then it kind of hits the fan and all of a sudden everybody's scrambling. And, the right answer is start earlier. Start freshman year, sophomore year, not end of junior year, which is how, again, I'm quite a bit older than you. So, when I went to college, it was, I did drafting with a pencil. We registered and did all there was no online didn't exist. So when we had to sign up for classes, we stood in a line in the gymnasium at the table for math class. And then when you got your turn, you picked your math class. Right. So dating myself a little, but a lot of parents will be able to relate to this. So that was the challenge. But because it's so expensive now, when I was in school, it was not unusual for someone to take 5 or 6 years to figure out what they wanted to be when they grew up. And if they made mistakes and had to do things differently or whatever, it didn't matter that much. It wasn't that expensive that adding a year was, oh my, now what? Now most parents do not want to hear that they need an extra year for college because the price tag with that is shocking. So what we're trying to do is, do it the best we can the first time, take advantage of all the opportunities that are out there, and it gets complicated. Every time the government says, oh, well, here's a group of people we're going to create a program that's going to help kids that want to grow up to be engineers because we're short engineers or teachers or whatever it is. So they created all these different programs. And now that's one more layer of complexity. Now you need to figure out, well, does my state have a program for teachers if that's what I want to be? Does the federal government have a program for teachers? What about the normal loan programs, the normal need-based aid programs, the normal FAFSA program? How does that all work? And how, more specifically, how will it work for us? And I think a lot of families will say things like, well, my brother-in-law didn't get any aid, therefore I won't. Which is probably not true necessarily, right? Unless your brother-in-law is very similar, same income, same academic ability, same schools on the list, all that. As soon as you start, and that's where working with a professional comes in is, I've seen all kinds of different plans and all kinds of different opportunities, some for that geeky engineering kid, some for the performing artists, some for the jock, et cetera, and they all have their own path and they all have their own opportunities that you want to take advantage of.
Whew, that was loaded, but loaded in a great way, just because one, like you even brought back some memories for myself when it came to just the nightmare, as we called it back then. And I say back then, like I'm so old, but as we called it, registering for classes. But now I almost feel bad for complaining after you're saying standing in lines and pencils and signing up. We would get mad if the online portal was taking too long to load and we couldn't get the class that we wanted. But y'all physically had to get up, be there, be present, and then still not even necessarily maybe get what you wanted to get in when it's all said and done. So perhaps my gratitude was not showing enough back then, but it is definitely showing right now as you explain that to me. But no, something that was really unfamiliar to me, even as you mentioned, was getting prepared early. And like I said, going to public school all of my life and just knowing that at some point I knew I had to go to college. Well, I didn't know I had to go, but I knew I wanted to go to college, but I didn't necessarily know the steps that I needed to take, what I should be doing now, what I should be doing then. And all those people who I would say were older than me per se, all they talked about was junior year, junior year, junior year. Just make sure your junior year is good. You have fun your first 2 years, you do whatever. But now that I'm hearing that I could have been taking steps every single year to make sure that I was even, because I would definitely say that my high school prepared us well. We were each assigned college counselors. We had a college interview day. We had all different types of resources and tips and tricks, but it was all up to you to take advantage of it. Just the same, that was all included in our tuition. But how are you meeting with your college counselors? And are you not only meeting with them, but are you implementing and applying to what they're saying? If they're saying that the Common App needs to be done, or that you need to fill out these essay questions by this date, then you need to make sure that that's done. If we're doing early decision or anything like that, you need to make sure that that's in. Applying for the financial aid is a totally different ball game. So I understand that, with this, the earlier the better at any point in time. And it's one thing to think about it. It's one thing to maybe have interest, but it's another thing to actually be applying yourself, to actually be building that foundation, to make junior year a smooth process and to make senior year fun. And then you get out of there and you go have fun. Now,
Right.
a question something that I'm curious about, and I want to see maybe just how much you can speak to this. When it comes to financial aid, when it comes to merit versus need, or just financial aid in general, I guess maybe we can even speak to, more need-based in this. A connotation that a lot of us college students had was that and I don't know if this was us maybe just at times taking things personal, but we just felt like universities could be doing more, could be giving more, and they're not. I looked at my school, East Carolina University, ECU, and even in some cases we called it East Construction University, because we always felt like something was being built. We always felt like something was happening. They were dishing money here. They were telling us this project should be ready by then, and then they kept prolonging it and prolonging it. We see a huge student center now that we've graduated, and it's so fancy, and we got restaurants we never heard of and student stores and galore. So do you feel like schools are finicky when it comes to financial aid? Do you feel like students could just be doing more of a due diligent process of securing and getting this aid, and like you said, preparing as early as possible? Do you feel like it's a culmination of both? What does it really look like when it comes to schools issuing aid to students? I understand that in some cases, the earlier the better, but I also understand that they look at financial situations, income, maybe what you did prior, everything like that. What does that really look like for students who feel like they should be getting more and they're not necessarily always getting the rewards that they think they deserve, especially with school being so expensive too?
Right. Well, yeah. So, need-based aid is based on the income and the assets of the student and the parent. If the student's 24 or younger, the typical student rolling out of high school and going off to college, they're generally going to have to report mom and dad as well as their own finances. And again, most kids that are just rolling out of high school and going off to college, their finances are pretty easy because they don't have any money and they don't have any income, and they're just a bunch of zeros. So now it's really based on mom and dad's income and assets. And need-based aid is kind of it has a weird effect, which essentially means they'll help you if you need it. So by definition, that means you probably can't afford it without. So it kind of pushes everybody right to the line of what they can afford, right? Because if the school is $50,000 and based on need calculations, you can only afford 30, well, they'll give you the 20 to fill the gap. If your income's a little higher and you can afford 40, they'll give you the 10 to fill the gap. And if your income is really low, they might give you 45 and then you have to pay 5,000. But when your family income is 25,000 and you have to pay 5,000, that seems really expensive. When your family income's 120,000 and you have to pay 25,000, that seems expensive. When your family income's 210,000 and you have to pay 50,000, that seems expensive. And well, again, as it should, because that's what need-based aid is all about, right? Is you're only going to get it if you need it. So if you can afford to pay for it without it, then you're not going to get the aid. So understanding how need-based aid works and getting something that you mentioned earlier, you have to also realize that students have their role, right? They're going to have to do applications and essays and put up good grades and test scores and that stuff. And the parents kind of have a different role of they have to support the students in what we just mentioned, but they also probably are the ones that are going to figure out need-based aid and merit aid. They're the ones that are going to figure out, well, can we afford $1,000 a month for college? If we can, should we be saving it now? If we can't, is it 500? Is it 200? how is this all going to come together, and how do we work that out? So the parents kind of have, financial stuff to deal with, and the students have the getting admitted and what do I want to be when I grow up and all that stuff. And then all that has to come together in a plan that works for everyone. And I think that's the challenge that a lot of families are up against. And a lot of times parents can do some of the stuff that they need to do, even though the student may not be ready, right? A typical freshman may not be mature enough to go visit colleges. But mom and dad could be saying, well, I think we should be saving $1,000 a month for college. So let's get started. Or maybe they've already saved $1,000 a month for many years. And now it's like, okay, is this enough? Or should we save more, depending on how many kids you have and how much you think you're going to spend? And, so it just takes that extra effort. And the reality of it is a lot of families that have kids in grade school and middle school and high school are really busy and spending the time to think about college. And, and again, there's some people that's their thing, right? They enjoy looking at investments and getting involved in finances and all that stuff, but not everybody does. And if it's not your thing, you still have to do it anyway. Or again, find someone to help you. And, but somehow it's going to have to be done. And if you can do it well, most of the time it saves you, thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars than if you do it poorly. And, so get to work, do it yourself, hire someone, get your brother-in-law to help, whatever it is, but don't ignore it because it's not going away.
It's inevitable one way or another. Like you said, before you know it, freshman year is gone, sophomore year is gone, junior year, that's that crucial piece. And then they're graduating. I even think about now how, just to put that in perspective too, I think about my little brother, how we're 8 years apart, and how, when he was in high school, I was just telling him, all right, it's freshman year, you'll be okay. You don't really got to think too much about it now. But those really should have been conversations that I was having with him, especially me being out of undergrad and graduate school, just and the preparation and wanting him to be as prepared as possible. Also, what I used to think about but didn't necessarily apply to was that, you're going to a public school at the same time. You don't necessarily have all the resources, or we're not necessarily having all the same conversations that we should be having. So I'm going to continue to just enamor that the earlier, the better, with building that foundation, with making things happen for sure. So those are great points that you made. Now, a lot of what you do, does it come as conversations and meeting and working with parents more so, students more so, or is it kind of a combination and a balance of both?
Yeah, I tend to 95% of my meetings are with parents. So I really do focus on the parent side of it. Again, I come from a financial background and investing and all that kind of stuff. I don't help kids with essays. I can't write any better than the average kid. And I can't help kids with what they want to be when they grow up. I'm just not qualified for those discussions. Now, there are people out there that do that. And sometimes we'll partner with somebody where I'm working with the parents on the pay for college side, and somebody else is working for the student on the how do we pick a college or how do we pick a career and that kind of stuff. So, and then that can be, melded together. But I think that's another important challenge is some students are very focused and they know what they want to be. And it's just all, they've already got it figured out. It's all laid out in front of them. And some students really struggle with the undecided, or I really like science, but I really like math. Oh, and I also really like music. And now I'm struggling with, should I be a musician? Should I go into math? What? I like everything. Therefore, it's hard for me to pick. And then there's the occasional student, I don't like anything. Now what do I pick, right? I don't, I mean, I think that's a caution too I think one of the biggest challenges that a lot of politicians have done to us is college for everyone is not good advice, right? There are situations where college is the right path, but some kids are going to need to attend the school of hard knocks or start at a junior college or take a gap year or two, or, skip college and jump right into entrepreneurship. And then there's a lot of careers where, if you wanted to be a coder, you don't have to get a college degree in computer science. You can literally go to coding boot camps and study on your own and become, graphic design is another good one. Lots of people self-teach themselves on how to do certain things, and you don't necessarily have to have the degree. Matter of fact, the degree might slow you down. If your goal is rock star, literally, I'm going to be a musician. Do you go to college and study guitar, or do you just get out there and form a band? What's going to work? And you need to kind of understand, what your options are.
I think that's such a crucial realization too, especially in today's day and age where it's been, I feel like that's almost kind of been like the traditional or the norm of an approach where, you just continue to go until you graduate school, you get a job, you have that family, marry, everything like that. But, I think a lot of even more, I would even say more recently, like recently meaning probably like within the last 5 to 6 years, about just more entrepreneurs emerging, more business owners coming about, more people just kind of taking their own stab at different things, taking that leap of faith, going different places. And I really think that the pandemic was a big responsibility for that. We didn't hear about people graduating virtually, attending things virtually, really stepping out into their own things, but there was a demand at some point. There were some places where you couldn't work, or maybe you were laid off, or maybe just depending on how you were affected in this, you had to take different options and different paths. And that's really where I think it really started to happen. Because I would even say with myself, like a lot of my friends, a lot of people who I grew up with and everything, that was just the road. After high school, we knew we were going to college. But now when I look at my little brother's generation, you see them split so many different ways, whether it be a social media way, whether it just be the trade way, whether it be, like you said, if I just want to go start that band and just take that leap of faith and do what I want to do on my own, that's really what I'm going to do. But no, to hear that a lot of your interactions, a lot of your conversations, a lot of the bulk of what you do is with the parents, I think that's the most important part. But to something I also think about now, okay, so we talked about the late stage college planning.
Mm-hmm.
When working with these parents, when doing these meetings, when thinking about these high schoolers and everything who we're working with, how then involved are you once they then go to college? Because I recognize that with college, the process really doesn't change. The financial aid is still going to be there, still going to be, you're going to have to open that app every year. You're going to have to fill it out. We're going to have to make changes and updates and salary and do this and do that and everything like that. So are you still noticing that with, even after working with the high schoolers, even after kind of getting them over that gap, getting them to college, getting them wherever they may be, getting them the need and the aid as it's all fit, are you still continuously tapping in with these parents year after year? Are they still kind of reaching out to you for different tips and tricks, for different ways that they can still even save once they get to college? Because I feel like that's the biggest thing too. And that's when you really start to see the bulk of your expenses. If you're living on campus versus off campus, what classes you're taking, what books and everything you're getting. So how closely involved, or how has the process been with, once you kind of help these parents get their students to college, what does it look like after that?
Right. Yeah. So, a lot of the people I work with, we go on and do other financial planning. And, so the very typical parent is, well, we're going to figure out college, and then we have 5 years off, and then we're going to retire. Or we're going to figure out college and retire immediately. And then for some parents that are older, it's like, well, we're going to retire while college is still happening. And, so figuring out, those two goals are almost always top of mind for the families I'm working with. And it's probably self-selection too, right? People don't reach out to me if they don't have kids in college or kids in high school. But working on both of those goals, again, from the big picture perspective, if you can be more efficient on retirement and, save some taxes or whatever, so you have more money for retirement, well, then you can contribute less to retirement and more to college. If you can make college more efficient, then you can divert that money to retirement. And if you can get them both figured out really well, then you're going to add a third goal. Maybe it's a vacation or whatever it might be. And I think for a lot of families, it's how do we get all these things, all done at a reasonable, nobody wants to retire when they're 90. Some people are happy with 70. Some people are happy with 62, and it's a big difference if you want to retire at 70 or 62, and how college will impact that can have a big impact as well.
Got it. I like that. I think Yeah, you played out a lot of different scenarios, and I'm almost kind of laughing now because I've kind of seen differences in different ones. Having the older parents that are just trying to, just trying to send them off and just make sure that he gets there safely or she safely, and then from there, let's start to think about what we're going to do here. But ultimately, the consistency, the commonality through all of this is just the planning. It's just that foundation. It's just making sure that you have some sort of blueprint, some sort of something to reference to go. And we're not just winging it. We're not just, because college can be a wing in itself, from deciding on that major to deciding that once you get in that major, that's something that you like and that you want to stick with, or maybe the classes are too hard, to prereqs, to getting certain things, to financial aid, to everything. Sometimes a lot of what can deter people from one way or another could just be pricing. And, if I know that I have to pay more to do this, to do all of that, and I'm going to have more schooling, and even after this, I'm not done. Well, hold on, maybe I might want to, pivot this way a little bit too, just the same. So it's interesting to hear, because, and I always like to kind of ask people that question of with the experiences like working with you, because I want them to also make them feel like it's a personalized approach time and time again. And each time I get that, when I go through your website, when I go through even the information that was sent to me about you, I can definitely hear that. I tailor that, because it's part of it. And I love the way the website is split in one portion. It's part of it about what you're doing from the parents' perspective, and then another part is about what you're doing from the student's perspective. But the part that stood out to me the most had to be around, and I feel like because it's something that's come up more recently in the years, as we've talked about, is when it comes to business owners and entrepreneurs and still wanting to attend college and make the most of your experience and get those benefits. So as I was kind of telling I'm not going to say back in my day, but when I was preparing for college in 2014, there were not a lot of business owners. There were not a lot of entrepreneurs. There were not a lot of people doing that. Now, when I got to college, I noticed people started to have their own side hustles, do different things, brand themselves, and everything of the sort like that. But now, with my little brother, him going into his junior year now, so 3 years ago, there have been an influx of people just having their own brands, of high schoolers doing their own thing, LLC in their businesses, different things of the sort like that. So how can students that are business owners, just the same, that are entrepreneurs, that have their own brands and everything like that, how can they still make the most out of what they're doing on the side, but also still go to college, still get that education, and still make sure that at the end of the day, that finances and everything are taken care of? Do you have anything around like tips or tricks or even strategies that business owners or that those students can be thinking about as they look to still further their career, but their education simultaneously?
Right. Yeah. So certainly there's, students out there that instead of getting a summer job, they have some sort of side hustle instead. So I work with a family where their son had an eBay business, and he was buying and selling all kinds of things. But one of his niches at the time was swimming pools, because it was through the pandemic and it was just hard to get your hands on a swimming pool. And lots of people wanted to put a swimming pool in their backyard because you couldn't go, the public pools were closed and everything else. So he found that if he could find the swimming pools, he could sell them. So he had different ways of getting his hands on swimming pools, and then he would sell them on eBay. And he was turning, profit in the tens of thousands of dollars. And then, of course, as he was doing this, now all of a sudden he started having inventory, and it got to be a real business that took some real business skills to manage and that type of stuff. So, but again, it was a very decent side hustle for him. And, again, and parents could be doing the exact same thing. They're either going to have their day job and then have a side hustle to help pay for college. But there's a lot of strategies that you can then use within that to, reduce your taxes. A lot of parents can hire their kids into the business and pay them a wage, and you get some tax savings that way. And the kids could hire the parents into the business potentially and get some tax savings, just depending on where the tax brackets land and that kind of stuff. So it's, so there's some tax planning around that. You can also set up tuition reimbursement plans. Like here in Wisconsin, businesses can contribute to college for their employees and get deductions for it. So on your Wisconsin tax return. So if you happen to live in Wisconsin, you could set up a contribution plan to a retirement, or a contribution to a 529 savings plan, and that may help. So there's lots of different things that you can do. It's just a matter of which ones will work from a tax perspective, from a but because there's more opportunities, you can set your salary, you can move income, move assets around. There's more moving parts. There's more opportunities to plan.
Whew, don't give us too many ideas now, Brad. You don't want us to be too successful. You don't want us to be too taken care of, but no, that's interesting. And I think it's so prevalent now because like we said, whereas before it wasn't really as many, or like you said, even during the pandemic. That's actually so interesting. And I smiled about that because wow, I literally remember the swimming pools, and I remember how everything was closed and how a lot of people with backyards, front yards, they were either in-grounding things or trying to even make the inflatable ones or doing something with else. So the fact that, wow, that somebody capitalized on that like that and through eBay, that's amazing to hear. But no, I always think that before we say that something is too late or just like we can't do it or we don't know or whatever to have you explore and you exhaust all those options and all those resources. As you said, a child could bring the parents into the business. Depending on where you live, different rules and ramifications, you could fit into something. I don't know how many Wisconsin people that we have on here, but I'm pretty sure that there were a lot of people that if they hear that about Wisconsin, maybe if they did some research where they are particularly, you could find something along those lines or even something different that'll allow you to be successful, allow your child to be successful, and allow them also to take advantage of everything that comes with college. So another curiosity that I have is the marketing behind all of this. I recognize that, as I said, I needed you years ago. You would have made life easier for all of us, especially from a first generation perspective. Whereas a lot of times, I was just going directly to my counselors and asking them a lot of questions and things like that. And a lot of it too was the influence of my parents at the time and just them kind of not necessarily wanting things their way, but them always just putting different options in my ear. And it kind of just, just when you think I'm gung ho and I'm set on this, now I hear this and now I'm thinking like, wow, that may not be that bad. So when it comes to what you're doing specifically, how do a lot of parents, how do a lot of even students, I'm sure, discover you? How is this like word of mouth? Is this something, are you implemented in other like high schools and in the Wisconsin area? Are there different partnerships or things that you developed over the years? What does a lot of that look like when it comes to the clientele and a lot of the families that you've worked with?
Yeah, well, I do a lot of work on podcasting. And I've got my own podcast. I've got my website with all kinds of free resources. So that's, pretty much where we focus, but and we do some online webinars and partnerships and we work with some of the local high schools. And so, but that's always a work in progress. That's, getting the word out. Most people don't know that this type of help exists. So that's part of the mission is to get the word out there.
And I was about to really just piggyback on that to say that, I feel like a lot of why people are just so misinformed or they just kind of take matters into their own hands, or maybe they're not as prepared as they could be, is that, sometimes even us as parents, as students, we don't do our due diligence on exhausting everything, on looking up everything. The first time we don't yield the necessary result that we want, the first time we don't get it how we want, we just kind of throw our hands up. And especially with college, and especially I think the parent perspective is even a little bit different. And granted, I haven't sent a child to college yet, but I'm not going to speak on that too far just because I don't want to adopt this mindset. But I feel like sometimes with the parents, it could be one of two things, or maybe one of multiple things, but two of those things that come to mind was to be, well, if you personally as a parent never went to college, then you may feel as though, you don't have much of a, I guess you don't really have much of an impact. You don't really, maybe you feel like you're not speaking from a place of education, or how maybe you feel like you can't necessarily help your student when you really can. As we said, planning involves all parties. And whether you have that college experience or not, I feel like there are still things, as you said, you could be thinking about freshman year, taking your son or your daughter to these schools to just to just expose them to that atmosphere, to get things going. So that way by their junior year, I've been to 8 different campuses. I know about this. I know to go here to do this. I know that this is in this. I know what cost of living means. I know room and board expenses and everything, So, but I also feel like too, sometimes parents speak from a perspective of wanting their children to follow a certain road or a certain route. And then when that doesn't happen, it's kind of just going. But I also feel like we, just as people, as much as you do, I'm sure that you've done countless amounts of research. I'm sure that you've had countless conversations with different people. And I'm sure that even with all the expertise and experience you have, you're still learning even to this day with rules changing with different areas. Like you said, the rule within Wisconsin is probably something that you had to learn in difference and working with other people in other places, So,
right.
sure that it's always necessarily you're always having to remain a student of the game. So I love that you say that too, because sometimes I think too it has to be like I'm pretty sure that obviously everybody that you come across, you want to help them, you want to ensure that they're set up for success as best as possible. But the people, the parents, the students, they have to do the work too. You can only take people but so far. You can only do much. You can only meet people but at some point before you have to say, okay, all right, look, this is not my child, but I want you guys to be just as successful and make things happen. So I get that. Now, something I also think about too is just the future outlook as well. I think about, while kids are just never going to stop going to college. College is probably, tuition is probably never going to stop increasing, different programs and everything like that. Rules are going to be changing. But I also think, with where we are right now in the world, there are so many different possibilities. Whereas, back then college was, it was only one or two, it was only a couple of places you were about to go. But now you have so many different ways to go. So when thinking about what you're doing and thinking about what comes with the industry, from the creativity to just the adaptation and adjustments, is there anything that, and I don't want to spoil any surprises, or I don't want to give away too much without, if it's not that time yet, but I like to ask this question because I like to give people something to look forward to. So as we continue through the rest of this year, even think about 2025, but continuously just helping college students, as well as, high school students, parents, and college students, just the same. Is there anything that you're looking to get more involved in, any even perhaps new ventures that you're taking on? I know you said that things are always a work in progress. So from podcasting to your own show to even the partnerships locally and globally, is there anything that you're looking forward to, anything that we can keep our eye out for? Because I know that business owners and entrepreneurs, we're always working, we're always thinking, even behind the scenes.
Yeah. So I am working on putting together a college planning course where people will be able to, at least it's likely to be called College Planning Jumpstart, where it'll help people get you started. It's not going to get you all the way to the end, but for a lot of people, they don't even know where to start and what information they need to know and how to put it all together. So that's one of our goals. And so that's one of the things that for sure that, is in my future. I just, no promises as to when exactly it'll get done, because, we always think we'll have it done in 3 weeks or 6 weeks, and it turns out to be 6 months. And so we'll see.
Something I've learned as a business owner, as a podcaster, is to stop giving deadlines to people. Because I tell you, I'm going to have this by then, and with my episodes, I stick to a pretty succinct schedule. But I've told people that I'm going to have this edited, or I'm going to do this by then, and like you said, 6 days turns into months, and then months turn into more months, and then you're following up, and people are nudging you and pushing different things, and that sometimes you even forget certain commitments or promises that you made. So I've learned to just try to keep it. It's gonna be out there. I will tease whatever, I'll put it out there. It's gonna get there. I'm not putting any timelines on it or deadlines on it. We're just gonna make it happen. But no, I love to hear that, because as you spoke to, the starting point, that could be arguably the hardest thing, because you don't necessarily what to do. We're looking at parents' perspectives, and we're looking at what parents want versus what the student wants, and who is it really about here, who's paying for it. Can be a lot of back and forth when it's all said and done. So I love to hear that you're moving in that direction to really just map it all out for people. Now, with that, before we wrap things up, before we close out, before we tell people where they can find you from websites and social media, do you feel like there's anything that we haven't touched on today? Even any last words that you may want to leave for people coming across this episode, whether they be students, parents, other business owners, or entrepreneurs, anything like that?
Yeah, I think Nike did it well when they said, just do it.
See, I don't think anybody's ever used that for their last words. So Brad, you just set the tone right there with the uniqueness there. But no, I love it. Like you said, it's no point of thinking about it. It's no point of procrastinating on and stressing about it. Just get it done. It's inevitable. It's whether we put it off for tomorrow, it's still gonna have to be done. Whether we put it off till junior year, it's still gonna have to happen. So do you want to make it that much harder when that time comes, or do you want to just ease into that transition because you use the jump start? So now, before we end this completely, we need, arguably to me, the most important part, the call to action, as I like to call it. I love to always, leave the episode with where everybody can find you, how they can tap in with you, from social media to websites to where they can be on the lookout for the Jumpstart when that time comes. So just give us everything you got as far as the best places to reach and contact you.
Right. Everything we do is at the website. So it's all at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. So we've got a podcast by that name. You can follow links there. There's phone numbers on our website. There's lots of free resources like a financial aid calculator and cost of colleges by state. So you can look up some numbers on all the colleges in your state. number of different resources that can help you. Scholarship guide for busy parents, another great resource that's out there for free. So just hit the website and it's all there.
And to hear that you are even offering a lot of these resources for free is amazing too. And I thank you for that, just because, there was a lot of time that was taken to put all this stuff together. There was probably money that had to be spent. There was editing and different things that had to be done. There was confirming, because we can't necessarily always believe everything that we just get at face value, at surface value. You then have to go look. Things are always changing, expanding. But I'm going to say it again. Wow, Brad, I needed you in 2014. I really needed you from 2010 to 2014 to make my 2014 that much easier. But, we're here, and I did it twice. So I really could have used you in 2018. Then again, just the same. But no, I really do appreciate all the work that you're doing. I spoke with someone in the college space episodes ago. He actually runs an AI company called Truth, and he really helps parents when it comes to decision making, to matching, to figuring out where it is you need to go. And I really feel like all of this is important, because there's so much information, there's so much misinformation, there's so many people who kind of just wanted tunnel vision and my way or the highway, not recognizing the endless amount of possibilities that are out here now, from business owners to entrepreneurs to trades to people just wanting to take their own route, to students sometimes not necessarily knowing what they want to do, or they could have grown up all their life loving and liking this, but by the time they got to school and by the time they really had to do their due diligence every day, this is not really it. So Brad, honestly, the work that you've already put in, the work that you're putting in, and then the work that you're going to put in, it speaks monuments. And I definitely just want to thank you. I want to thank everybody, the team over there. You guys are working hard. You guys are doing amazing things in Wisconsin and beyond. And I'm definitely excited to, one, just tap into the journey where we are right now, but just to continue to see everything from the Jumpstart Go Live to whatever other initiatives and ideas come along the way. So to everybody out there too, who's tapped in with us today, whether you joined us live, whether you're listening at a later date, I thank y'all. I love y'all. This has been another episode of the Down to Business podcast here with Tamar Turner.